This is a Q&A for the Qigong certification program run through the Yoga Pharma Ithaca. And I am Brian Isaacs. I'll let Catherine introduce herself. She's one of the best and most amazing teaching assistants I've ever had. And so she's joined us on the Q&A and she can help to answer any questions, certainly about logistical things as well. But the Qigong program is a 200-hour training program, but it has really like a chunk of core classes that are beginning towards the middle of next month. And those core classes run for 12 weeks. And then there's multiple hours of cue rehearsal and training sessions that we provide space for. So there's two things that we like to make sure we kind of get out there during the Q&A process. One is what the nature of the training is like. A lot of people have questions about how they can fit it into their daily existence. And so those are good questions to have. And we'll definitely try to make it clear what it actually looks like to be doing the training and part of the program. As well as questions about lineage and what kind of Qigong we're doing, what the kinds of training is or are. And then the second sort of set of questions is about, the actual yoga farm itself and what training online looks like, what the tech looks like, and that sort of thing. Yes, this is the Q&A for the Qigong Level 1 certification through Yoga Farm of Ithaca. Yoga Farm is a not-for-profit that has become one of the leading online certification platforms in the world, and it's been a real pleasure to work with them. I've worked for several different seminar companies over the years, and Yoga Farm, as a true not-for-profit with a mission-driven identity, has been not only the most supportive environment for students, but also for teachers. And so they've really gone head and shoulders above when it comes to creating a platform that's easy to use, that delivers the training in an authentic and legitimate way of transmission, where you're able to get correction and make sure that the movements are being performed, in a way that's correct and accurate. While also trying to make it as accessible as possible for people all over the world. My name is Brian Isaacs. I've been teaching Qigong for about 23 years. I've been practicing for about 25. I have lineages in 3 different Chinese, let's say, movement art systems. One is Taiji 5-element Qigong under Binhui He, which is a medical Qigong set that was used primarily in a hospital setting. Second is Yang Taiji Chuan through Beijing Physical Institute under my teacher Zhang Ke. And then third is both the Liang Zhenpu Bagua Zhang lineage, as well as Shanxi Xingyi lineage under Li Guicheng. All of that can go in one ear and out the other. You'll have access, if you join the class, you'll have a sheet that describes where all your Qigong forms come from, so you can point to your lineage accurately. But it is, what lineage means in Chinese movement arts is that it's essentially like your degree. It's where you learned your material and that you're authorized to teach it. So within the 3 different lineages that I operate out of, there are several different Qigong sets. And those Qigong sets range from very, very gentle kind of source code movement patterns that are simple, easy to perform. Anybody, whether they're in a wheelchair in a nursing home or a kid in a kindergarten, can play the movements safely, accurately, and quickly. But they're very profound. They're very, sometimes the simplest movement is also the most in-depth movement, right? We also play a fair number of kind of total body, both medical and martial Qigong sets, which give you, I think, a very broad kind of an alphabet of movement that by the end of the class, you will feel that you have good control and command over those movements. And then simultaneously, we are doing this through the lens of learning how to teach those movements. I think that there's something really special about this, and that often the best way to learn and to really embody movement is to try to figure out how to both demonstrate it and explain it to other people. So that's kind of core to the process of learning the movements in the first place for us here. And, a lot of people sometimes are curious about like, well, do you learn the movement well enough to then go and teach it to another person? And the thing that's great about Qigong as opposed to like a internal martial art practice, which takes years to really master the movement patterns, is that the movements are very simple, but with proper understanding of both theory and philosophy behind why you're doing what you're doing. And then also real unpacking and practice, much practice of demonstrating, playing the movement, and then explaining it to another person. The students that we've had come through the program have very quickly gotten good at the movements. I watch every video during the certification process, and it's like, I was honestly, when I first started doing online teaching, I was concerned that folks maybe wouldn't be able to get it, and I wouldn't be able to see that they couldn't get it. But blessedly, this is not the case. I actually have been able to observe students practicing in lots of different opportunities for them to do so, from office hours to in class. If people choose to, they're able to turn on their camera and get correction, and then in submission of video. Excuse me. Um, so the program is, I think, the best quality you can deliver when it comes to doing online training of Qigong. And I've done quite a bit myself. Like, I'm always trying to learn more. So I'm always going in and doing different types of programs. Obviously, to some degree, the bigger the better, right? But I've found that there are two things that students have been able to do that really vastly improves that if they find that they can't see. So one thing is that I've gotten pretty acclimated to moving the camera around me rather than making you guys blow up the image or something like that. So like if I need you to see a precise movement of the spine or something, I
Mhm.
got right up in there, sometimes uncomfortably close. And that's part of how we manage that is I make a big effort to get multiple different camera angles and distances so that if something's a little bit challenging to observe, you're able to see it. There are, depending, if you have an iPad, then you have the opportunity, if you have Wi-Fi in your home, generally you can broadcast your iPad screen directly to your television. And so what this looks like is generally a much blown up version,
Mhm.
often uncomfortably so. If you have like a high definition TV, you'll see every pore on my face. And we do a lot to manage this. So it is something that we've thought about quite a bit and worried about, especially, for me, learning how to teach to a camera has been, let's say, the third iteration. I think you guys are going to have the best experience yet, is what I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah, what you all are seeing right now is kind of the studio space. A lot of the teaching I do is actually in my office, where I have very bright LED lights on. And so, I mean, it's not pretty, at least not to my eye. I think the studio is a much prettier environment,
Mhm.
but you can see me quite well in there. It's very bright and everything is I'm making a point to teach to the camera and showing spinal movement when we need to show spinal movement, hip movement when we need to show hip movement, foot placement, and the whole 9 yards. A lot of times when you do some kind of online training, what you're really buying are sets of videos, right? I'd be willing to bet almost all of you have at least explored some of those things. And what you'll get is often really good production quality, but you'll get either one angle or two at most, where it's just like, this is the demonstration, and you can rewind it and rewatch it, but that's it. That's all you get.
Mm.
With us, let's say you're watching me do something and you're like, I'm not seeing where he's moving from. I don't get how that movement pattern is transmitting. You don't even have to turn your camera on. You can just type into the chat, like, hey, can you show that from, 45 degrees right? And I'll stop what I'm doing and do that for you. It's pretty interesting. It's a new world we're all living in, but I've been really pleasantly surprised by how well Qigong transmits through this kind of medium. And honestly, I wasn't sure it would. Like when I first was contracted to do this, I was kind of like, this might not work, guys. But they had such a good experience teaching yoga this way that I was intrigued. And having done 2 full runs of the program now, I'm sold. I think that this is a valuable and very accessible way to get these arts out in the world. So I'm excited to be doing it. I initially developed this material teaching to a Master of Science in Acupuncture program. And so we actually had full syllabi for each semester, and it was taught in a sequential way so that acupuncture students would be able to teach Qigong. And so the course expectations and requirements are all listed in our syllabus, which we provide before class starts. And basically, it's done with an eye of not only knowing what you are to know, but also what the expectations are about how you are able to demonstrate it and what the sort of theoretical underpinnings are. Now, unlike a college class, we're not interested in penalization or grading you. That's not really what this sort of idea here is. What it really is about support and making sure that you feel that you're getting your questions answered and getting the movement patterns as we're trying to share them. And so one of the things that Yoga Farm is excellent at is creating a support structure around the weekly class material. Before you start the class, you'll have sort of a very clear sense of what's coming ahead, when classes are, what's going to be in each class, and then what the expectations are of you in those classes. But to give you kind of a loose overview, the first month of training, the first 4 weeks, so let me start actually a little bit broader than that. Is the class schedule? There are core classes, there are office hours, and there are cue rehearsals. The core classes you have to complete. You don't have to be at every single one of them live. Certainly, we love having you there live, but we have lots of people who did great in the program, only being able to go to the recordings, basically, because they're available after a couple of days. You're able to watch the whole class whenever you want. And that continues in perpetuity. You have access to those classes basically forever. As long as Yoga Farm exists, you'll have access to those classes. So the core classes meet on Thursdays from 11 to 1. They meet on Saturdays from 1:30 to 3:30. And they meet on Sundays from 1 to 2:30, all Eastern Standard Time. So we've had lots of people where they've been able to make it to the weekend classes, but can't swing Thursday classes. That won't damage your ability to enjoy the program at all. The class structure is laid out where Thursday classes are theory and philosophy, so it's more of a lecture format, although we always practice. We do Qigong every session because it's all tied together, right? So each week we'll be going over a couple different movement patterns from a set, and we'll be exploring the theory and philosophy behind why we're doing those particular movement patterns on Thursdays. Saturdays are live practice days, so we physically learn the movements and we practice them very extensively with lots of opportunities for questions, answers, corrections, re-showings of things. And we also will iteratively go back through sets that we've already learned. So an example of a Saturday movement class might be we warm up, we play a set that we learned in the beginning of the program, and then we go into kind of what we're learning for the second hour. And we do those 2 movements for the first time, learning the ins and outs of them. And then Sunday class, we essentially practice again, but we do so through the lens of how do we explain this? How do we teach this movement? So that's often done with kind of an eye towards verbal cueing, as well as how do we utilize things like isopraxis or people's sort of mirroring our movements to help transmit that movement pattern, like what's useful to kind of exaggerate, show bigger. And so people have found that it's a very iterative and you're being re-exposed to the material in sort of different angles multiple times through the program. So it's never like you just learn something and then that's it. You don't see it again. We are going back through things over and over and over. Um, and that's the basic core classes is Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Office hours are offered by multiple people. There's myself. There's others that are teachers within Yoga Farm, and then there's people who are within the Qigong program. Similarly, cue rehearsals are offered by a bunch of different people at different times. Cue rehearsals are essentially places where you go into a private space with another student and you run them through a Qigong set. And then you have access to the teacher of the cue rehearsals or the person facilitating it. And you guys can kind of bounce questions off them. And often it's designed to give you a little bit of experience kind of running somebody through the movements. And B, it gives you an opportunity to figure out what your questions are so that then you could go to an office hours or a class and be like, hey, when I was running people through the Badawan Jin, this came up. What would you do during that? And so it's really designed to give you a lot of opportunity to practice, play, and get your questions answered. When it comes to where all this occurs, the actual camera stuff all operates through Zoom, but we are in a different sort of a milieu where we're in a kind of private social network called the Mighty. And what it looks like is that you'll have access to everything in sequential order in one place through your Mighty, kind of network there. So it's like everything, and this is all, by the way, thanks to the illustrious Catherine, who I cannot live without, but she organized everything really beautifully in the Mighty so that you know exactly which class has what in it. And you can just click and go watch any video that we've done as you go. But you also have access to the instructors almost all the time. I mean, people ask questions from all the different cohorts we've run at all hours. And generally, I just go on and answer them because I like to. It's not necessarily like constant engagement, but I mean, it's much more engagement than you think. I can assure you of that. Like when people ask questions, they get answered on there. And so it can be asked in a private way through the direct messages, or we encourage people, unless it's something really personal, to ask questions in a public way so everybody can see the question and answer, because that just sort of benefits all. But obviously, if it's like, since I've been practicing, this OBGYN concern has been coming up, then we also have the opportunity to direct message, and you can ask us about personal matters too. We're active on there. Everybody is active on there. So there's a lot of activity. And I think a big part of the class is the engagement and question and answer sort of process that happens on the network. Think of it like private Facebook without anything evil or terrible happening on it. Yeah. So that's kind of a rundown of what it looks like while you're going through an average week. As you'll start on Thursday. You'll be doing theory and philosophy. We'll be kind of exploring various topics that include things like channel theory. We talk a lot about Qigong theory. Obviously, you have to have a pretty firm grasp of that. Not so much with things like channel theory. That's more to become what I think of as being sort of literate with it, where it's like you understand what channel theory is about, and you might, if you get interested, know how to go and look into it more deeply as you go. But we always do talk about what channels are being opened and closed, what Chinese medicine sort of functions we might be performing. And I think that by the end of the program, people do have a pretty solid working knowledge of basic fundamentals of both Chinese medicine and Qigong theory, which is a broad order, but I think it really enhances Qigong practice, if nothing else. Even if you never teach utilizing that information in a verbal way, it helps you understand the movement patterns better. Um, we also do incorporate a fair amount of Western physiology and anatomy in there, primarily looking at sort of the most contemporaneous research as to why Qigong is so useful. And a lot of that is looking at things like fascia and the interstitium. And then we've got some functional neurology ideas happening. So that's a kind of an element of the program that is, again, you don't have to memorize it. You're not being tested on it. It's not about that, but it just adds some depth. And if it's something that interests you, you'll have the tools to go forward and learn more about it. So that's theory on Thursdays. Saturdays, we move. Everybody loves Saturday classes. I think what's cool about this program is that it's very specifically targeted towards the Qigong professional teacher. And so when I talk about, let's say, a concept like interstitium or myofascial chains or networks, what I'll do is I'll have it in the note packet so you can read it and it'll be bolded so you can kind of look up what that word means. I'll be explaining it pretty extensively. Usually, I don't really brag about myself, but there is one thing that I know that I'm good at, and it's taking information and explaining it in a way where people understand what I'm saying. That's one of the things that I really have spent a lot of my career trying to get good at, is taking a complex concept from Chinese medicine and putting it into English for us, for me, because I'm not that smart, honestly, so I have to for myself. So if I can do that, then I can share it with other people. And I think that that's a big part of the teaching methodology, is like, how would you explain this?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just sort of like shooting vocab at you and kind of making you look it up. We're approaching it as a conversation.
Thank you.
A lot of this is because Chinese medicine is in this fascinating place right now where research is coming out like rapidly. So it's I mean, a lot of this is stuff that's new to me too.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at research that's coming out of Harvard this year, the idea that the interstitium is this kind of like transfer of fluid and information through different core vital organs, like that was new to me too. So a lot of this stuff, it's not like, yeah, it's not like, okay, here's your vocab lesson, go memorize this and then we will test you on it. It's not like that. It's a conversation. So no, you don't, there's no presupposition of knowledge. You could come into this class, I believe, as a fully practicing Tai Chi martial artist with a long background and get something out of it. You could come into the class as an acupuncturist and get something out of it, or you could come in with zero experience in Chinese Shenfa or movement patterns and get a lot out of it. So it's definitely not. This is our level one. This is where we start. Tiffany says, "Hi, Carol. Uh, I've been learning with YFI for a few years, and I'm a fan of coordinating student study Zooms together." Yeah, that's another thing is that the network really offers, is the ability for you guys to build a community and make friends and, do sort of sessions and study together. Yeah,
Can I jump in and say one quick thing?
of course.
So in follow up with Carol's question, I was a social worker, so that was my educational and licensed background many, many years ago. And then for a chunk of my life, I was a stay-at-home mom, and then found Yoga Farm and yoga teacher training just through the pandemic. And so coming out of Brian's teaching, I was a student of Brian's, not a colleague that has like 100 years of, traditional Chinese medicine training or Qigong training or anything like that. Had done some other trainings with other people, other Qigong teachers, and have no medical background, no acupuncture background. That's just not where my life has led me. And I feel completely confident after training with him and now working with him as one of his TAs, being able to teach other people. So just if that makes you feel any better, like social worker, stay-at-home mom, and I'm okay.
Okay.
I did okay with all this, and I'm not going to say that I can go out and lecture on anatomy and physiology and things like that. But the things that I need to know to be able to take this to other people and give them a really nice experience, you'll get it. You'll be great.
I can sort of say that from the perspective of like having taught this at the college level for a long time. I taught for the college for 14 years. So like really ran through the Qigong program a lot with those guys. And then also teaching in private for-profit seminar environments where it's like, I mean, the way I learned it was basically that, it was under the auspices of like, this is a very traditional Chinese traditional training and blah, blah, blah. But really it was for-profit seminars. It took me a while to figure that out, but it was, I mean, these guys are trying to make a living too. One of the things that's interesting is like, I would go to New York City or Hangzhou in China, and you get this like drinking from a fire hose experience where it's like the Chinese are just like teaching you, and questions are okay sometimes, but you can easily offend an older Chinese man if you ask questions that they can't answer easily. Like if you ask a question about like Western neuroanatomy, they might hate you forever for that because you kind of made them lose face a little because they were like, I don't know. And so it's a little bit fraught. Like you would get into these sort of complex relationships where you would only have access to your teacher a little bit. And I learned that way, but I don't believe in teaching that way. Having gone from that and then going into my first kind of heavy duty teaching experience was actually in a drug and alcohol rehab. They hired me as a rec therapist, a recreation therapist. You didn't need a license back then for that. Yeah, they just paid 20 grand a year, and they were like, sure, you do workout and qigong. That sounds great. Come on in. So I got hired that way, and we had to teach for long chunks, like 2 hour chunks, 3 times a day with different groups within that rehab. And so one of the things that I realized was that there's no excuse for being closed with information when it comes to this stuff. And the Chinese have actually figured this out as well. If you want to, they don't want the arts to die. So they're trying to disseminate and share it really widely. And they're all very on board with stuff like this because they know that their arts are going to die with this generation if they don't. So the idea of like where there used to be, if any of you have any kind of traditional Chinese martial arts or kind of Qigong training background, and certainly I think this is true in some of the Indian arts as well, but like the kind of like, mystical, don't ask questions, just, observe the process and that is, it's like the opposite. So like the more questions the better, the more we're exploring the information and material together the better. And I'm really really happy to not know something, and so I'll go look it up with you, and then we'll figure it out together if we don't know the answer to something. So I think that that's another kind of factor of yoga farm training that's really cool, is that it's bringing together what we like to think of as sort of the masculine and feminine a teaching environment. And this is not my language. I actually feel deeply uncomfortable using those terms because it's like kind of fraught right now. But I think that it's coming from a traditional perspective of there's kind of an orderliness and focused delivery of information where we have a clear set of understanding of what we're trying to learn and expectations for how to learn it. But then also we're creating a very emotionally safe and supportive environment where we're free to explore and play. And the freedom to explore and play within that structured, ordered kind of teaching comes from being a trauma-informed and supportive environment with a lot of years of experience, not just with me, but with all the yoga farm instructors, trying to figure out how to create teaching methodology that really is inclusive, safe, trauma informed, and precise. Um, so yeah, that's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. Lord knows I've been in non-safe environments when learning this stuff, where it's like you're in a martial arts context and there's actual physical corporal punishment as like a tool that they're using. So this is about as far from that environment as it gets. And I never noticed myself learning Qigong or Chinese martial arts better for that. The cue rehearsals are like supervised practice rooms that you're able to ask questions and get feedback if you want it. But you can also go in there and practice like in a totally private breakout room with one student who you have gotten to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when it comes to the technology aspect of it, Yoga Firm's incredibly supportive with that element too. What we do is we provide sort of the framework for this through Zoom, through our Yoga Firm account. So even like when it comes to submitting like a final video or something, we've had folks that have literally never done anything even remotely like that technologically. And Yoga Farm like walks you through step by step how to record the video into the right place. So that's another thing that I think is kind of cool about the program is the tech support is like, and I'm not just recommending it. I use the tech support myself quite a bit. I mean, I actually didn't own a computer before this. So it's not like I'm some kind of a tech whiz and this has been the natural way that, I mean, my family I have a daughter in college and a teenager. I mean, we have lots of computers, but I've never needed one in I keep paper notes. I'm kind of a Luddite in real life. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if I can do this stuff, you guys definitely can do it for sure. I mean, if you're able to get on this Zoom call, this is the highest level of technological expectation of you. So you've already done the hardest thing that you need to do. When you sign into Yoga Firm, they give you instruction sheets for how to sign into everything. And then you're in. Like you basically, it's the same process as it was to get on this call. As you we'll put the URL in and then type in the password. Or once you're in the Mighty Network, it's as simple as clicking the day's class.
Okay.
You basically will just go to your activity feed or, the course events feed. And the next class that you'll have will be in there and you'll be able to see them all, laid out for the whole time. And so, I can say that we've certainly had tech things that we've had to work through, but we've never had a student not be able to get in, basically, like that I know of. It's always been really, really well laid out for folks. And the Mighty Network is basically like a downloadable application for your computer or phone or tablet. Definitely Yoga Farm recommends doing it on a computer rather than a phone, but you'll get the best experience through a computer or tablet for sure.
What'll happen if you sign up for the course, once you start getting the emails from Yoga Farm asking you to sign a document and things like that, they'll invite you into Mighty Networks, where you will then kind of join this platform, and your courses will be listed out there. So for somebody like Tiff, who's been in with Yoga Farm for a long time, she'll just end up seeing that once she signs up, which she would see that she has a new course in her current Mighty Network. So anybody on here who's already with Yoga Farm, it'll be a little different than if you are a new student. But once you're in Mighty Networks, you're in there. I have found it to be fairly intuitive, and I do most of it from a computer. I might check on my phone occasionally, like if somebody sends a question in. But once you're in there, and you get used to it, I hope, and I think you'll find it to be fairly intuitive and laid out well enough that you can see, okay, here are all my Saturday course recordings. I missed the 23rd. So let me go back and watch that one. Let me push done at the bottom, and then it's going to give me a check mark so I can see I've done this class. And you can continue to move down through there if you've missed a live class, or if you want to just go back and rewatch a class, or if you're in the car on a road trip and you want to re-listen to the theory class that you had 2 weeks ago because you just want to hear the information again. Really easy to access, and be able to gain access to all of that material so that you can have it either for the first time through or take a second pass at it. All your handouts will be in there. Videos that Brian records for us to use as like 10-minute practice chunks, meditation recordings as these things come up in the class and it's time, those things will be made visible to you so that you'll have all those resources. And by the end of this course, you're going to have so many resources that you can access. Book recommendation lists are in there because people tend to want to know what books are great to read. I think we've got at least 10 or so on a list that's posted in Mighty Networks under book list. So there's a lot of great information that you'll have access to if you come into the course, get into Mighty Networks, and new stuff will pop up every couple days.
And you get to keep access to that. So that is just in perpetuity, your material to go back and reuse, practice. There's live studio classes that run through the week that you'll have access to for a time period where you basically can come to. We just had one this morning where you can come and practice, and it's, you still can ask questions like you're a part of the class. And that's another element that's kind of fun is you get to see different like students and me doing actual live classes as well. But that's just sort of like an add-on. There's information and material within the core classes, and that's what we're really working from. But you have access to a lot of stuff. There's also a lot of free offerings that come through Yoga Farm. There's a wonderful teacher within the Yoga Farm community named Jaya Lalita. And she also does Qigong programming, and a lot of it's often free. She just does kind of free seminar-based stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities once you're in the Yoga Farm sort of network to kind of re-engage and keep getting more and more info. So there's kind of two different levels to it. One is that I teach from a trauma-informed background, which means that I am doing things in a manner that it is aware and vigilant and careful of being a trigger for people's trauma as a teacher. And so what that includes is certain types of linguistic framework and certain ways of proceeding or not proceeding to touch, or, I mean, obviously I'm not touching you guys ever, but, if we were in a live environment, like how I would approach to touch. But even with cameras, the idea of like, how do we use language to create a safe environment, language and behavior to create a safe environment for all of our participants, so that we're not a trigger for a traumatic experience in someone's past would be the one level of it. Second level is how do we, as teachers, embody that and do that? So the way that I initially was exposed to this was through working in the drug and alcohol rehab. Most of our clients either suffered from, at some level, PTSD or comorbid with mental illness or both, right? And so one of the things that I kind of learned the hard way was, how do you approach a person who's in complex PTSD? How do you speak to that person? And then when you get into like doing mind-body connected sorts of movement patterns, what happens when the physiology of trauma begins to resurface? So one of the biggest elements is not unpacking the narrative around a traumatic event. So let's say I'm teaching a standing posture where we're standing, holding, doing standing post holding Qigong or something like that. And as the person is doing their internal sort of scan down through their body, they start to feel like a panic attack coming on. Having tools already in place to manage that situation is part of the training. Like, how do we manage somebody's physiology going into, sort of a traumatic experience place? A lot of times the physiology and the mind will kind of, if left unchecked, they'll go together. So for instance, like the person will begin crying and maybe telling their story, and then the story will generate more physiology, and then the physiology will generate more narrative structure around it. So part of what we try to do from a trauma-informed perspective is give people tools to sort of throw a monkey wrench in that works, so that we're actually identifying and experiencing the physiology without going into a full narrative experience of a traumatic event, which I think is incredibly important, because unpacking trauma is certainly beyond the scope of a Qigong teacher. And, I think most, like Catherine's a social worker with more experience in this than I, but I think that most would agree that like in a Qigong class, that is not the environment to, start diving into people's, traumatic pasts. So learning how to manage that, both as a teacher and, myself managing it in real time within the class structure, is of paramount importance. Teaching mind-body connected movement is a wonderful way to help people heal and to help people have tools to balance and calm their physiology under unpleasant circumstances. And it's something that has a real technology to it in Qigong training. So we learn how to do it in a safe, gentle, and consistent way. Um, does that answer that question? Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
That's one of those places where the physiology of it all is getting really interesting. So looking at, so for instance, a wonderful book about this is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Vendor Oak. Did I say his name right? Those of you know the, yeah, so he's really one of the world's preeminent sort of researchers into both the physical and psycho-emotional ends of trauma, and seeing it really as a biopsychosocial kind of a picture, as opposed to just sort of like a mental illness, which is how it's generally been treated for a lot of the last century. And looking at how do we use things like mind, body, sort of somatic experience-based training as a vehicle for healing from things like that is something that I'm very passionate about. And it's certainly something I utilize a lot in my practice, even when we're talking about like, I'll just share a quick story. So my sister and I did a lot of Qigong together about 20 years ago. She was with me in the Benhui He training. And so she was doing a standing posture, and she was having this very intense physiology come up while she was doing it. Like think like panic attacky type stuff. But she was taught the tools for how to sort of, access that and deal with it without like unpacking it too much. And so she practiced the way she was taught. And what happened was that she started having these kind of very intricate, interesting fantasies while she was standing that included her being in a basement. And then there was like a vampire involved. And then there, it was very weird stuff. And I was like, Lillian, what the hell are you talking about? Like what do you do? And then at some point, she had this during practice, she had this realization. She remembered being a kid. She remembered being scared of the basement because she thought there were vampires in the basement. And she remembered falling down the last few stairs of the basement and falling on her arm. Oh, and I forgot to mention, throughout this whole process, she was having searing, ridiculous pain in her arm. So she's standing, she's feeling tremendous pain. She's having like mini panic attacks, and she's fantasizing about vampires and stuff. This is intense, But eventually her mind put the pieces together just through gentle practice and maintaining the kind of composure that we teach ourselves to, have when we're training, and using the safeguards that we teach. And what she discovered was that she had fallen, broken her arm or injured her arm when she was a kid. Our parents, God bless them, but they weren't great at a lot of things. And so they probably never took her to the doctor or anything. So she had this arm pain for a long time. And then she had this psychological sort of wound of it, of being frightened, of being injured down in the basement. And so unwinding that and unpacking that was like a several month-long thing where she never really actually accessed the narrative of the trauma because she didn't know what it was, right? And what do we do about trauma that comes from a pre-verbal time? How do we describe the narrative of that? We can't. So what Qigong does is it gives us a tool set. It gives us a a kind of a technology we can use where we can safely begin opening, releasing, and working through the blockages in our chi that come from these things. And I loved it for that because it's sort of like an outside in way of working where we never actually have to go back and tell our story, for instance, unless we're very much ready to and we choose to do that on our own terms, but not in this context, not in a Qigong class, with a trained individual who's there to help us. So I think that that's one of the coolest aspects of Qigong is this mind-body connected technology for healing from both physical and psycho-emotional traumatic events. I feel like I just blathered a lot about that. I hope it answered your question, though. Any other questions? I think we've got a few minutes left. So if anybody's been sort of sitting by and like, man, Tiffany, hi, Carol. I've managed through my courses here mostly with my phone. Printer would have been helpful. Still don't have a printer. I've submitted questions for the office through the phone app and watched the recording later. When you begin to notice you need support, it will meet you there. Academic trauma isn't part of my experience here, and that's pretty rare for me. Oh, that's a really good thing to mention. Is also the trauma that we experience in academics. So Yoga Farm as an institute and myself and my TAs and assistant teachers and everybody, one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is academic trauma and the sort of trauma that we experience as students. And so creating a supportive, warm, nurturing environment where we are able to undo some of that. Oh my God, they're going to call on me and I'm not going to know the answer. They're going to humiliate me. I'm going to get caught with my pants down in class. Like that kind of academic trauma is something that's a part of all of us. We all have experienced that to some degree. And so we approach our courses from an informed, compassionate perspective. That is a huge part of the Yoga Farm mission and vision, is actually both approaching that from a compassionate space and being evidence-based and informed in how we approach it.
When I first started at Yoga Farm, I'm not a social media person. I'm fairly private. I don't love to put a lot out there on videos and computers and social media. So I stayed behind my camera with my screen off probably for my entire yoga training. And then in the next yoga training, I got a little bit bolder. And now, of course, here I am. But yeah, so I was like, oh, I don't need any more friends. I've got my core group. I'm good. I'm going to go do this training. And in a room one night, I met another woman about my age. She lives in another state, like, across the country, and we've become friends. And 2 years later, we still text and check in on each other's dogs and kids and how we're doing. And it was just one of those happenstances where we ended up in a room together and exchanged phone numbers and supported each other through our training, did more training together at the same time, and have kind of kept in touch. So sometimes those things just happen. Yeah. And sometimes people are like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay in the class. And that's okay too. Whatever works for you. You can take as many opportunities as you want. Sometimes people will post in Mighty Networks, hey friends, I can't make it to the Monday night or Wednesday scheduled cue rehearsals. Does anybody want to exchange information and meet and make our own cue rehearsals? And that's completely fine and wonderful. So sometimes you'll see that happen as well. So that's been my experience as a person who didn't come to make friends and ended up making a good friend or more.
Thank you.
So for some of us, it's more challenging if we're a little more reserved with this type of environment, but the opportunities are certainly there when anybody's comfortable.
Thank you.
I mean, having done what you were talking about, where I would go and travel and then be with a core group of people where we would meet, once every month or every couple weeks. And, like that kind of intimacy is a unique thing, right? Where you kind of by proximity, you build these friends for life. And that experience is really valuable. And I think that Yoga Farm is a place where you will develop those types of relationships. One of the things is that Yoga Farm has multiple retreats yearly, both at the Yoga Farm itself and in places like Costa Rica and Panama. And so like those are opportunities where you actually can get that physical, like live contact. And we are still a not-for-profit, even when it's in a gorgeous retreat somewhere in, South America. So they have like scholarships and all kinds of financial options available. But I think that Catherine's really right in that it's really your choice how much social engagement you participate in, which is good because some people really, like maybe don't want a lot of people looking at them on, and so like for somebody who's maybe more, let's say, physically extroverted, they might leave their camera on during all the classes. That we mute you microphone wise, so it's not just like a cacophony of craziness in the rooms, but like you're able to unmute and ask questions whenever you want. So there's invariably like a handful of people where like everybody kind of gets to know each other's faces, and that happens pretty quick. And it's like kind of a fun thing because everybody's in their own space and they're kind of comfortable. So in a weird way, you're getting a more unfiltered, like I, in a weird way, sort of know you better than I know lots of people that I've gone to some class in New York City with, because I'm sitting with you in your home, and you're sitting with me where I work. And so that alone, like there's a freedom in that, which is sort of like it's maybe not always good. Like I think it's a very intimate thing that we're doing here. Where we're like, I mean, would you have me into your home maybe? Like if you didn't know me, probably not, right? But here I am. I'm sitting with you in your living room or your, office or wherever we are. And so there's something sort of strangely intimate about this that's very different and more. It feels I don't want to say like less formal or more off the cuff, but like you're often in my house with me. You guys will meet my dogs. My daughter and my son will walk by at some point. You'll see the books on my shelf. I'll see the books on yours, and like, so I mean, the opportunity to get to know each other this way is sort of new and it's interesting to me. I didn't think I would like it, but I do. I actually do like it.
Okay.
Catherine, were you raising your hand or were you just? Oh, okay.
I was waving. Kathy had to
Oh,
go.
yeah, oh yeah, it is actually 10:01, so I also have to go. But did you guys get your questions answered okay?
Yes.
Great. If you have any questions about technical or payment or anything like that, uh, support at yogafarm.us. They're wonderful. They'll get right back to you. It really is a true not-for-profit. So it is like, it's our goal and our mission to try to get folks, like help them figure out how to do the programs they want to do. And so I hope that you'll keep reaching out to them, and making sure that you get your questions answered if you have any. Similarly, you can always come. We have these on Saturdays and Thursdays for the rest of the time right up until the program starts. So, if you suddenly go, oh, I wish I had asked that, just come back next time and we'll be there. Well, I hope we answered your questions. If we didn't, please feel free to come back. You're welcome to be a repeat customer at these Q&As. And hopefully we'll see you in class.